The Honorable David Walker, former Comptroller of the United States and Hall of Fame accountant, is back for another discussion of fiscal responsibility in the United States. David is a staunch advocate for properly designed incentives, transparency into cost, and accountability across all of our systems, from healthcare to immigration to taxes and education. David's book, America in 2040, Still a Superpower?, dives deep into various sectors of our nation's finances as he calls out the stark challenges to our global leadership and potential for its deterioration. I'm Damon Davis, and this is my Discovery Diary with one of the United States' top fiscal responsibility advocates, David Walker.
Oh, you're in D.C. Well, I'm in Alexandria, right across the river.
That sounds fantastic. Well, David, it's wonderful to see you again. Thanks so much for making time. I've really been enjoying the book. It's dense because you've got rich knowledge, but one of the things that is always interesting to me is I've lived in healthcare for a long time, and I currently work, full disclosure, for a large pharmaceutical company. And one of the challenges that I think we have is in our healthcare spending in this nation. And in your book, which I love, America in 2040, Still a Superpower, with a question mark, chapter 16 goes into federal spending. It looks at 2019 data. $1.3 trillion in fiscal and related costs are growing faster than the economy in this nation. Healthcare represented about 29.5% of the federal spending and 19.5% of all federal tax preferences in fiscal 2019. This is a massive challenge we have before us, and I'd love to know, when you think about Medicare, Medicaid, what are some of the reforms that you would love to see this nation go through in order to get us to better healthcare fiscal responsibility?
Well, Damon, thank you for the question. Let me mention a couple of things up front that I think are relevant. In addition to being a former Comptroller General of the United States, which, as you know, is like Auditor General, Chief Accountability Officer, I've also been a trustee of Social Security and Medicare. I've also been Assistant Secretary of Labor for Pensions and Health, as well as the Pension Benefit Guaranty Corporation. And I was co-chair of the Institute of Medicine's End of Life Committee. And so I've got a lot of experience around healthcare as it relates to policy issues. My daughter-in-law and my granddaughter are also RNs, which I just found out was the most respected, trusted profession in the country. But anyway, here's the issue, a few facts. We spend a higher percentage of our economy on healthcare than any other major country by a wide margin. And yet at the same point in time, we have below average outcomes in certain regards, with regard to life expectancy, with regard to infant mortality, with regard to medical error rates, etc. Something's wrong. In my view, when you look at any system, whether it's a healthcare system, a tax system, an immigration system, education system, you fill in the blank, you've got to have three things that are aligned. You have to have properly designed incentives that encourage people to do the right thing, that discourage them from doing the wrong thing. You have to have adequate transparency as to cost, quality, and other factors to provide reasonable assurance they will, and to help people make informed decisions. And then you need to have appropriate accountability if people don't do the right thing, but recognition and reward if they do, right? Well, I would respectfully suggest in the healthcare system and a couple of the other ones that I just mentioned, we're 0 for 3. That's called a strikeout. So it's no wonder that we have a problem, okay? I think one of the more fundamental things that we have to do, and there's a lot that we have to do that's outlined in the book, that the people support, by the way, all right? Mm-hmm. One of the things that we have to do is we need to have an honest conversation about what level of universal health care, and yes, I said universal health care, that is appropriate, affordable, and sustainable, that the government should guarantee that will exist, that will be publicly funded, meeting consistent with those criteria, but delivered through the private and not-for-profit sector. We don't want government in the business of providing the health care. Obviously, the big exception is the VA system, and it's got challenges it's got to deal with. But we've never had that discussion. And what the American people will generally say is, well, that's preventative and wellness, which we don't do enough on, and it is catastrophic care. It is unexpected accident or illness that could wipe you out financially. And that varies by by what your means are. And as you know, Damon, the largest source of bankruptcy in the United States is healthcare. That's the largest source of bankruptcy. So we need to have that fundamental conversation. We also need to look at where's the government spending money and where's the government giving tax preferences that we're not getting an appropriate return on investment. And I'll give you one example. One example is we're trying to control healthcare costs, and yet one of the largest tax preferences in the Internal Revenue Code is that individuals don't pay income tax or payroll tax on employer provided and paid health care. That
Mm.
costs the federal government several $100 billion a year. In addition to that, it desensitizes people for what the true cost of healthcare is. And it undercuts that concept of incentives, transparency, and accountability. Last time I looked, when you got benefits like that, it was called compensation. Okay. And maybe there's some basic level that you give on a tax favored basis. But the irony is the plans that are the richest plans get the biggest tax subsidy, which undercuts the ability to provide for those who are truly in need.
Mm.
And so I think healthcare, education, immigration, and our tax system are four systems that we need fundamental transformation based on those three principles.
Uh-huh. Those are amazing points. As I was preparing to talk to you today, David, I went back and I watched a YouTube video from you at Dartmouth 13 years ago.
Okay.
And I can't tell you how irritated I was at the fact that everything you said 13 years ago still applies today. Nothing's changed, if not, most of it's probably gotten worse. You said things
Although
like,
the numbers are worse, I can
"Oh,
understand.
numbers are huge." I know, that's exactly what I was saying. And I was so dismayed to think that we could go a decade plus and still have, basically, you could give the same almost exact speech today. You just need to update the slides because all of the issues persist, if not worse. So you said
And I
things
hate to tell you, Damon, but the big beautiful bill is a big budget buster. And
like,
while it may end up helping stimulate more economic growth in the short term, it's going to make our structural fiscal challenge worse.
yeah. Say more about that. Why is that? I think people hear that line repeatedly, but give me a couple of top line issues that you are really sticking your craw as a public CPA and super numbers guy.
Hey, look, I'm a pro-growth guy, and clearly to the extent that we can grow faster, we can help deal with our debt to GDP problem because it's too high and we need to bring it down. But right now we're adding to it at record rates. The problem is our political system is such that they want to focus on the short term. They want to focus on the next election and not the next generation. And the Republicans want to minimize taxes, and the Democrats want to grow government through spending from the standpoint. The combination of the two makes the situation worse, right? We haven't had a fiscally responsible president since Bill Clinton. Bill Clinton was fiscally responsible. George H.W. Bush was fiscally responsible. They're two different parties, two different people, but both responsible. We need to we need to wake up, recognize that we're on an imprudent and unsustainable path, and start taking some steps to put our finances in order if we want our future to be better than our past.
Yeah, these are really wonderful points. We've got a moment left. It would be remiss of me not to address the fact that over the weekend, we had an attack in the Middle East where we dropped some bombs on Iran. And I know that the war tends to be a major fiscal challenge for any nation. It's not a revenue generator. Leave me with your comments on what it looks like for this nation to go into what could potentially be another multi-year engagement across the world.
Well, it's clearly not our desire to invade Iran or to engage in a protracted conflict with Iran. The objective was just to try to be able to neutralize their nuclear efforts. Hopefully, we won't have to do anything else, and hopefully, reason will prevail going forward. The president, on the one hand, has said that he doesn't want to engage in any new protracted wars, especially in the Middle East. At the same point in time, he's also said for years that Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon. What we did this weekend, we're the only country in the world that could have done it. And nobody else could have done it. And let's just hope that reason prevails from this point on, that we can get back to the negotiating table and resolve issues to bring peace back to that part of the world, because it's a very troubled part of the world and has been for many, many years.
Yeah, agree. what's going to end up being the budget impact of a long-term engagement if one happens?
To be determined. I am very hopeful and cautiously optimistic that we won't have a protracted conflict over there. It's not in our interest. It's not in their interest to do that. And, but this situation is very different than Iraq. Iraq was based on false pretenses. Our purpose there was to be able to change the government, and yet we didn't declare a war. It cost thousands of lives and trillions of dollars. That's not the situation with regard to Iran. Iran was a limited, targeted effort. We have no desire, nor does it make any sense to put boots on the ground there. The thing I'm concerned about now is what's Iran going to do? And you hear rhetoric from China, Russia, and North Korea that they might provide Iran with nuclear weapons if they can't make their own. That would be totally unacceptable. And I just hope that's just blustering rather than any serious talk, because that makes no sense at all.
Yeah, I think the challenge we have is in any relationship, if your neighbor said your barbecue was making too much smoke and they came over and they knocked over your barbecue, you'd be pissed. And so the same thing is true here. Like, it's a relationship. And if someone comes into your backyard and does something, you can't help but think, how am I going to get them back for this? Or that was not cool.
Yeah.
And
especially if they do it without giving you warning.
Exactly.
But in our case, we did give them warning.
David Walker, it has been absolutely wonderful to see you again, sir. Thank you for the guidance. I'm going to continue to plow through the book talking about healthcare. I'm going to hit you with some other things next time. Evidence-based payments, implementing a budget cap. You've got some wonderful things in here that I want to dig into.
Thank you, Damon. Appreciate it very much. Be good.
Good to see you.